Um, okay, good morning. My name is Waukesha Howe. I am a community champion here in Atlanta, Georgia, with my lovely co-host, Miss Sherelle. We have Nkoyo. Did I say it right?
Yep, Nkoyo.
Lewis. She is a candidate for Atlanta School Board, seat 9.
Correct.
Okay. We're gonna get to know her. This is the kickoff to a conversation with the candidates. And so this is virtual. It's gonna be saved. You can watch the replay, and so forth. So let me do the little disclaimer. I am not paid. Um who have here in Atlanta, nieces, nephews, person. So I just want to hold space. This is a safe space to have a conversation to get to know her. So we have an icebreaker for you. I'm going to read it.
Okay.
It say, what did you have to give up to achieve your current level of success?
Ooh.
Yeah, I said that too. I was like, this good.
Ooh. That's a good one. Keisha, you got me here going hard right out of the gate. All right. What did I have to give up to get to my current level of success? I will say pride and ego. I'm Christian by training, and they always say, you need to die unto yourself. And I think one of the things that I have had to let go of is thinking that I can do it all by myself, or I know the answers, and have to really humble myself in a lot of spaces to ask for help, to say, hey, I got this wrong, and help me figure out how to do it right. And so I think that I am where I am today because I have had to let go of thinking that like it's got to be about me, and that I'm, have to, like all the things that pride and ego sometimes force us to do, right? Like hide when we're making mistakes, like not ask questions, not be willing to ask for help, not be willing to take help and feedback, etc. But I think that I'm absolutely where I am today because I've had people let me know you're feeling yourself and you need to make sure that you're not ignoring so many other things, because no one knows it all themselves. No one has all of the answers themselves. And I think that is why I am where I am today, because I've been able to accept that and lead with humility in spaces that I go into.
Wow.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that was, listen, I love icebreakers. I'm always in meetings. So we always do a icebreaker somewhere. And I was like, that's a dope one. And that's, like you said, right off the gate, we in it. So tell us about you. Who are you? Where are you from? Like, where you been? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So, most simply, I am a dreamer who has always sort of had a love for education, love for helping other people see the best in themselves and meet their full potential. I am an immigrant. My parents came to the US in the 1970s. They landed in Ogden, Utah, which is where I was born and raised. Yeah. People they don't always expect that one. They don't anticipate that one. But yeah, I was born and raised in Ogden, Utah. Always stuck out like a sore thumb. Was definitely the only little Black girl in my class for the longest time, the only Black family in my school was mine. And so have always sort of had to navigate the space of sticking out, even when you want to like fit in and trying to figure out how you create community with people who don't have a similar background to you. I ended up leaving Utah as soon as I could. I went to, made it a point to go anywhere but any of the universities in Utah. So my journey took me to Rhode Island, which is where I did my undergrad, and had a great opportunity to first see some of the challenges that we have in education. And it was from that experience that I then moved to Atlanta in 2006 with the explicit purpose of teaching. I came here to teach. I wanted to teach in a community of people who looked like me, who maybe didn't have the same experience in school. And like I mentioned, I absolutely loved school. It was a place that was safe and supportive and fun and free for me. And it was also someplace where I was like good at those things. And so I didn't realize that that was not the experience that many kids had in school, even my own peers, and definitely not the case that many of folks who look like me had. And so I came to Atlanta with the purpose of really trying to make sure that classrooms had the joy and the level of rigor and the success that our students could feel and our families could be a part of. And so I taught here, had some really great experiences, was in an own journey of learning. I always say, I think my students, my fourth graders, taught me a lot more than I taught them about the world, about what justice looks like and feels like, about how important it is to have spaces where you can be your full self, where you can feel safe to learn and grow and make mistakes and bounce back. I learned a lot from my families about pride and humility and like engaging with people as real people. Um, and so I took those experiences, ended up coaching teachers in APS in Fulton County. I coached teachers in K through 12, so I saw the full gamut, but I spent a lot of my time with our elementary school teachers, making sure that they were able to use data to ensure their kids could actually read and do math. That was one of the things that was really big for me. Like I said, I loved literacy. I happened to be pretty good at teaching kids to read, and also pretty impactful helping others, teachers, figure out how they, using their own set of skills and strengths, met the needs of their students. And so, like I said, my through line is always trying to make sure that people get to realize their full potential and feel the joy and fulfillment in being who they are at their best level. And so that's the work that I've done in the classroom. I left the classroom after realizing that one of my teachers was at Thomasville Heights Elementary School, which some of you may be familiar with. And so I coached two teachers there. They were elementary school teachers, kindergarten teachers, actually. And they used to have these chants that they would do, and they would talk about like, where do you want to go? College, not prison. And I just remember being like, wow, like at 6 years old, like start like creating this very clear opposition, right? Like it's either college or prison. Like there's so many things in between. Like, why is this the conversation that we're having with 6-year-olds, right? Like I just feel like that was very young. And one of my teachers told me, well, they know a lot of people who are in the prison. And I was like, what prison? Because my mind could not compute that the building that was like a mile or so away from that school was a medium security prison. And when the day that clicked for me, I decided to go to law school to figure out how we change law and policy to make sure that our children are in environments that are affirming, that are helpful for them, because they never get to choose. They don't get to choose their parents. They don't get to choose where they live. They don't get to choose what classroom. They don't get to pick our school board leaders. They don't get to participate in our system until they turn 18. So for 18 years of their lives, decisions are made for them by people. And I wanted to make sure that the people who are making those decisions were making that rooted in the understanding that like our kids deserve the absolute best, regardless of race and place. And so I went on to practicing and have been an attorney. I have represented parents and students in special education and school discipline matters, and really worked to make sure that no child is put out because of a bad decision, and that we find ways to make sure that they are able to engage and be a part of our school community, and that your differences don't take away from the dignity that you deserve as someone who's showing up in school buildings.
Wow, that's pretty dope. And speaking of Thomasville, that is my community. I am the education committee chair down here on this end, and I fought alongside with people around the city of Atlanta to just make sure that those families had a stable community, stable education. That was just such a hard dealing. And I advocated for housing
Mhm.
for those families. Because I actually used to live across the street from the school. My oldest son, started at the school.
Yeah.
And you did talk about being a teacher. Um, so how did that get started, and what was that like for you being a teacher and then kind of switching out to coaching teachers?
Mhm.
Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I will say, hands down, till today, teaching was the most exciting, thrilling job that I had. There is nothing like watching children discover something themselves. I have small children now, 4 and 2 years old, and seeing them learn how to do something. My daughter is infamous for like, I'll do it myself. And I'm always like, no, like we gotta go. But then I'm like, no, let me let her do it herself, because there's something that's very powerful about her being able to put her shoes on, even if they're on the wrong feet, right? But she did it herself. Zip up her jacket, even if it took us like 10 minutes to get there, but she got to do it herself. And there's something that's very powerful about that. So teaching, going into a classroom every day with students who, not all of my kids came to me in fourth grade on grade level. I had a number of students who were promoted to fourth grade. And so they were there reading on various levels. But being able to see them that and help them see that just because this is where you're started doesn't mean that's where you have to finish. And just because you haven't felt successful before doesn't mean that you won't be able to feel successful again, and actually helping them move forward in a way so they could see themselves successful was probably some of the most powerful and impactful experiences that I've ever had. Um, Leaving the classroom was actually a hard decision for me. I was definitely moved by the idea of being able to sort of replicate the success that I had in my classroom in multiple classrooms. And I think for me, that's always been what underlies a lot of what I'm doing. Like, how can we have more impact? How can these things that are happening right here happen in other communities, happen for more students, allow more teachers to feel comfortable and confident and capable in the work that they're doing, allow them to then translate that to children who get to see themselves be successful, families that get to have success alongside their child. Like, my husband and I, our oldest child is on the spectrum. And so we have gone through the experience of, getting all the calls that are always negative. He did this, he didn't do this, he can't do this, he's not doing that, come get your child, like all of that. Like, I have lived that, and it is not fun. Like, it makes it like we would be so excited for summer break because it's just like an opportunity for us to just enjoy our child and not be like, why aren't you doing this? And this teacher called me about this, and this didn't happen. And I went to this IEP meeting, and, all those types of things. And so I really left the classroom to coach teachers to make sure that we can get more success happening, thinking that if more teachers were successful, they could show other people on their grade levels how they were getting success, and we could kind of make this trickle happen. What I also found, unfortunately, is that a lot of times those of us who are closest to the problem get blamed for everything that's happening, but there are things that are happening at the system level that make it very difficult or challenging for us to show up and do our work. I know, and I say this now, I remember when I was first started teaching and I was trying to figure out how I use all the different resources that were asked of me. And I raised my hand in a staff meeting and was like, I don't know how to use this book. Like, how are we supposed to use it? And it was like silent in that space, because it was not a culture where you could ask questions, where you could say you didn't know what you were doing. And I remember people reaching out to my good friend and being like, yo, tell Effiong, we don't ask questions like that. Like, you go in your classroom and you close the door and you do what you need to do for children. And I just think, what would it look like if we didn't have to go into our classroom, close the door, and try to figure it out by ourselves? And so that, I think, is something that happens at the systems level. Even though we have policies in place, a lot of times those of us who are parents, children, teachers, we don't feel the impact of these policies that are supposed to be in place to help us. And so after coaching teachers for a while and seeing that, again, I said, wanted to see what this looks like at the law and policy space and be knowledgeable about how laws and policies are written in education, so that I
Mm-hmm.
can marry the experience of being a parent, being an educator, with law and policy, and hopefully close the gap between what it says we're supposed to be doing and what's happening on the ground. Did I lose you? Am I out?
No,
Okay.
I had broke up. That was me breaking up. I'm still like, I think my internet is just wishy-washy today. But no, I heard the law part. Could you repeat that?
Yes. So I went to, like, I had the experience in the classroom. I had the experience as a parent saying, you know, hey, we're supposed to have these things in place. This is supposed to be a space we can learn and grow and work together, and that not always being my real lived experience. And so when I decided to go to law school, having sort of had that moment at Thomasville Heights Elementary, I wanted to make sure that I understood how the laws were created, how policy was created in education, so that I could connect my experience as a teacher, as a parent who's been on one side of laws and policies, with how we actually create these things, so that there would be less of a gap between what we're saying is supposed to happen in schools and for children and what actually happens on the ground.
And for the record, I'm a mom who has a kid on the spectrum as well. I graduated my hardest kid. I have 8 children. So I graduated him, which was one of the hardest. I got the phone calls and I went up to the school. Like, no matter, you got to work, go to school. I went. I know every parent can't do it. I went and I seen that he wasn't the only kid. So I got involved and I asked, hey, how can I help? I joined the PTA, I joined the Go team. And I was like, Miss Tanya, you know he up here cutting up, right? Now, I'm just letting you know, because I know they're going to call you.
Yeah.
And, you know, that keep her from having to get out of work, because a lot of us cannot afford to stop working to run up to the school all the time like that. And luckily, I was able to do that. And I worked with the principal no matter how tough it could be, because it can be very intimidating. The teachers, the staff, I always tried to be the homeroom mom, because I know a lot of moms, our moms work third shift, our moms work at the restaurant, our moms, you know, work in the clothing store, so they can't be up at the school. So I tried to stand in every chance I get. I got a lot of pushback. That's why a lot of people know me, because I did get pushback. I went over and volunteered at Thomasville. Like I said, my oldest son, he started there. But I do know special education, baby, that's a whole nother topic. And we just
She's gonna jump back. But yeah, I mean, I know that's a whole, it could be a session in and of itself. Oh, there you are.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think I froze again. I'm turning my camera off. I'm gonna turn my camera off, see what it worked. But what I was saying was that I actually I volunteered over at Thomasville. And I volunteered at other schools. I volunteered in the cluster schools as well. And I started to get to know other moms and other cluster. Because here's the thing. No matter if you're on the north side, the west side, east side, or south side, if you're Black, 99.9% of the time you are behind, you know. And so with that being said, Miss Sherelle, if you ready, I want to turn the floor over to you so you can ask your question, because I know you're a mom that care about that as much as me. So I'm gonna turn my camera off. Miss Sherelle, you have the floor.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Miss Howell. And good morning, Miss Lewis.
Good morning.
Is it can I turn you can I call you Attorney Lewis?
You can, but you can call me Miss Lewis here.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Good morning, and thank you for coming and sharing with the community your background, your skill sets, and your love for children in a space where it's sometimes difficult to stand for children, even though we would love to. So I'm going to go. My first question is going to be based on something I saw on your website, and it says race and place should have no bearing on access to to a high quality education that creates opportunity for growth and development. Yet they impact our students' ability to succeed each day. So my question to you is, how would you galvanize your colleagues should you be chosen as the next District 9 at-large board member to ensure that students with disabilities are not only included in the high-quality educational opportunities, but that they are also included in being prepared to graduate ready for life, career, and post-secondary education should they choose?
Yes, I appreciate this question. And I think one, that having the perspective of a parent who has had to do that work, who knows how challenging it can be, not that it can be, that it is, to make sure that your child has a dignified learning experience and actually gets what they need, is a perspective that I feel like sometimes is not heard or appreciated or taken seriously. I think when I look at the number of parents that I have worked with, either training them on how to advocate like an attorney at their own IEP meetings because they couldn't afford to hire attorneys or advocates. And honestly, our system shouldn't require that. But really being able to explain and express to my board members how our special education population is equally deserving, and they actually have a federal law that protects them. And so there's a requirement that we show up and do what we need to do for them. But also from a pedagogical standpoint, from like a teaching standpoint, a lot of the interventions that we are doing for our students who learn or behave differently also have benefits for our students who are not diagnosed or classified as such. And it is really a rising tides raises all boats. We absolutely need to be more laser focused in APS on our students with disabilities population and their families and hearing what the challenges are, because our educators are also telling us that they don't have the resources, the training, et cetera, to meet the needs of their students. And that is not fair to put both a teacher and a child and a family at odds with each other because the system is not providing for each of those people what they need. And again, you know, on the board, it takes 5, right? And so one, we have an equity policy. I have always advocated in my law practice that we have to be thinking about equity, not just in terms of race, not just in terms of place, but also in terms of ability. How are we making sure that our schools are equitable for kids who have disabilities, and especially for kids who have invisible disabilities, right? The kids that don't, quote unquote, look disabled. Because a lot of times they sit in a very vulnerable position because we assume, oh, they're doing something because they don't want to, or they refuse to, or they're defiant. And I used to get a lot of kids who were referred for long-term or long-term suspension or expulsion over subjective things like defiance, et cetera, which could be a misinterpretation of a child who's on the spectrum, of a child who has ADHD or any other number of things that don't, quote unquote, look disabled. And I think that there's also a conversation that I would love to raise and have on the board about what that intersection looks like when we talk about race and ability, because we have data that also shows that if you are a young Black boy who is autistic, the chances of you being diagnosed and classified as such are much lower than if you are a young white male who might be of higher means. And so one, I think it's bringing that perspective and that voice to the board and being able to speak knowledgeably about it, because I've not only lived it, but I have litigated it. Like I have been there as an attorney, seeing what that looks like and what it takes for families to be able to be heard, and really making sure that through policy, that our equity policy is looking also at what is happening with our students with disabilities, that our discipline policy is also looking at what's happening with our students with disabilities, and that our community engagement plan is also thinking about what engagement looks like for families who have children who learn or behave differently, who are often going to have more meetings, more interactions with the school. And unfortunately, right now, they're not always positive. And I think that there are ways that through policy and through bold leadership, we can make sure that we are setting up a system that has the foundation to meet the needs of every single child. You know, when I say that, every cluster, every classroom, every child, it's not just a slogan. It's something that I truly believe is possible that we can do. And it comes from making choices around policy. It comes from choosing the right leader and holding that person accountable, and not just holding them accountable if they're messing up, but also figuring out how do we coach them to the outcomes that we want to see? How do we make sure that we're putting in the support for the superintendent to be successful and do what needs to happen? And how are we also looking at our budget, which part of it comes from federal funds? And I'll be honest, the federal government has never fully funded the special education program. It has never fully funded IDEA, and that is a huge problem that we have to fight collectively with our federal government, but also with the funds that we do have in our schools. How are we making sure that more of them are going to children and less is going to fighting families in terms of getting the stuff that they need and are entitled to? So that's how I would really be working forward, is just making sure that I'm being a voice and an advocate on the board, that I'm using policy and our budget to really make sure that we are equitable in our approach to our students with different abilities.
Wow, that was more than a mouthful, but I appreciate your response because that hit home for me, and I'm sure as well as Ms. Howell. Being a parent with a child with special needs, we understand that the playing field is not always level. So I love the fact that you used it and referenced that all boats will rise, with the highest tides, and I like that.
Often said, it's a David and Goliath match that we are at, to try to make sure that our kids are getting what they need and that we're holding the districts accountable. And I think there are ways that we can make that playing field more level in how we share data and information and how we make sure that we're engaging. And as a board member, I want to be able to share that there are ways that we can do these things differently, and make sure that we are putting them into policy, because our board is bound by its policies. It is required to follow its policy.
So in essence, what you're saying is that we need to create policies that would reflect your work.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
and I think there's foundation of where that is. It's making sure that, one, the policies are as inclusive as they need to be for all of our population, and then two, that we're actually doing what we said we're going to do in the policy. And I imagine both of you have had that experience where you've fought for, you went to all these meetings and got a great IEP in place, and then 6 months down the line, you find out that they're not doing all the things that you guys agreed to do, right? We need to make sure that we don't just create plans and policies that live on paper, but that we do the work each day so that we feel the impact of them. And where it's not working, where we pivot and move to the next thing because we have now information and data to make a better decision. And so that is definitely something that I will be pushing as a board member, that these can't just be words that are on paper. They have to be things that we feel on the ground.
Well, Ms. Lewis, you apparently were in my living room when I wrote these questions. So I certainly appreciate that. My next one, as a candidate at large with a background in law and an interest in education, more specifically special education, what will you do to affect the educational disparities in educational violations of students with disabilities in the 87 APS learning sites?
Yes. Also a great question. There's a quote that's out there that is like, you cannot change what you will not confront. And so I think the first step is really confronting the data, really looking at it and making sure that we are proud of what that data says. And I know numbers are just one metric. They don't tell the full story, but I think we also have a growing population of families who are saying, what we're doing is not working, and that the solutions are not there, and that they are not timely. And we can't wait. I don't think it's fair to keep asking parents who have children who have additional needs to wait till we get to you. Like that doesn't work. And our kids are deserving even right now. And so I think the first thing, one of my big approaches, one of the things that I think is most important, and it could be the attorney in me, I love evidence, I love data. I want us to look at the data and understand what it says. And if that data, which currently shows that students with disabilities are not graduating at the same rate as any other population in our students without disabilities, then we have to be serious and committed to figuring out why that is and taking the steps that we need to take to change that. Because every child is deserving, every child can learn, and we need to do the work of making sure that that is true for every single one of the students who this district is entrusted with.
Thank you for that response. I'm telling you, you were definitely in my living room when I wrote these questions. You brought up an interesting point about true data. And I'm not certain if you had the opportunity to look over Atlanta Public Schools data as relates to the year of 2022 and the graduates right after the heels of COVID. So it appears that we had a higher graduation rate, and more specifically with the students with disabilities. I have been advocating for an interest, if you will, to make an interest for the school system to look at the year of 2022, given the fact that they were in the pandemic the longest, and it had an effect on their educational progression. Having said that, what would you do, or how would you approach the board on advocating for the students who they graduated out but were not literally ready for the world?
Mm-hmm. You know, Ms. Sherelle, that is a very personal question for me. Our oldest graduated in 2021. And despite a lot of our best efforts, showing up, advocating, doing all the things, trying to put in the right services and support, he graduated, but we live with that reality that he is was not ready for the world. And a lot of things with the pandemic didn't happen, right? So you're supposed to have a transition plan. There are all these transition things that were supposed to happen. We had this shut down. A lot of these programs, et cetera, were either at capacity, which is a huge issue that we have, as even if there are the supports that are supposed to be there to make sure that our children are able to live independent lives outside of this K through 12 experience, those things are at capacity, or they aren't available during the pandemic. And so I think a lot of parents have children who graduated, have diplomas, but don't have the skills and the tools that they need to live independent lives. And it's a hard place because I feel like, you know, a lot of different organizations, a lot of different entities let us down in the pandemic. I think a lot of people were scared. They didn't really know what to do. We didn't have a plan, and our special needs students definitely suffered a lot on account of that. And I don't know, you know, I have looked at this. I've talked with other attorneys who've practiced and advocates in the special education space. Like, how do we make these students whole? How do we resolve things for them? And I wish I had a great answer right now, but I think that one of the things that sits with me as a parent who is living that is that we have to be urgent and diligent with what we're doing right now, because our kids, they don't get forever for us to figure it out. And we as parents in the community have to fill in for what our district and our schools didn't do. So I wish I had a better answer for you for that, but I think it is in part right now making sure that we are never in the same place again, that there's never an opportunity to make the same mistake again, and that we are putting into policy and into support for our educators, our school leaders, et cetera, the things that they need so that we don't find ourselves here again.
But no, your answer was perfect. It was personal, and I appreciate the honesty behind your response. So no, don't think that it wasn't good enough, because it was. I was heartfelt, and so I certainly appreciate it, and hopefully, you and I would have the opportunity to address that in a more in-depth way.
Absolutely.
Because certainly I think that we're setting our children up to meet the expectations of those who have put out negative projections for students with disabilities and the prison school to prison pipeline. And that's certainly not where we want to see any child, and certainly not one with a disability who does not have the ability to understand the world as we know it.
Exactly.
So certainly I would definitely love to have a sidebar and be of some assistance in that area. But I guess my question also, it was going to be, if there is ever a conflict between the board and or its member when it comes to meaningfully or appropriately addressing the whole child, what would be your position and how would you start that conversation?
Yes. This is a great question. And I anticipate that there will be conflicts, right? We all have a different perspective of what meets the best interest of child. And sometimes there are other perspectives that get in the way of doing what is right for children. And so I think in all of the spaces that I have had to confront this as a classroom teacher, coaching teachers, as an attorney, in all these different spaces, one of the things that I have learned is that change happens at the speed of trust. And so what's most important for me is that people understand that day in, day out, regardless of what it is, my preferred form of currency is impact, and impact that advances the lives of children. And reminding, and I think what's great, the board is in their second year of this student outcome focused governance, and really focusing on spending more of its time talking about student outcomes is returning us back to the things that we've already said that we were going to do. We already said we were going to commit to soft G. We already said that we were going to have this equity policy and we were going to be bound by it. We already said we were going to have this charter system and that we were going to share governance and leadership with our schools and the community. And so we have to go back and do the things that we already said that we're going to do. Because when we don't do what we said we're going to do, it breaks trust. And when the community doesn't trust us, it is going to be incredibly difficult to make sure that we are raising expectations and outcomes for students, because you cannot do that separate and apart from the community. So my goal in all of those, what would potentially be difficult conversations where there is conflict and emotions and all those things, is to ground us in what the school board is supposed to do. And we are supposed to be in the business of educating children. And that is the primary business that we have. And we have already put these tools into it. And so being able to use the things that we have already said we are going to do as the accountability measure to force us to have the conversations that we said that we're going to do, to make decisions that might be difficult for certain communities, certain constituents, but are actually there to advance what's necessary for our children in every single one of our clusters, is the reminder, the force, the conversation that I am comfortable having. As an attorney, we have to have difficult conversations all the time. So I am not afraid. I do not shy away from having conversations and keeping them rooted in what is the business and the goal that we're ultimately trying to achieve together.
Well, I appreciate you standing boldly. I think I saw on one of your websites you use what, audaciously.
Yes.
Okay. And so I appreciate you being just that, and we'll hope that you will continue that fight and that stance. But I guess my last question, it's not last question, I could talk to you all day long. I'm enjoying this. But as it relates to, well, let me start here. Georgia law requires that students attend public or private or home study programs from being the age of 6 to 16. And I guess my question is, with that being said, are you for as relates to goals and guardrails, are you for dumbing them down, or are you for just emphatically stating that we have an expectation to rise?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that I have a whole thing about leading audaciously and being audacious. And people rise to the level of expectation that you set for them. That is a lesson I learned day in and day out in the classroom. If you told a child or you thought that they weren't going to be able to do something, they rose to that expectation. And so I truly believe, given where we are starting, what the baseline is, that we have to be bold in setting goals, that we have to raise the expectation for our children and do what we can do what we must do to meet that goal. Lowering the goal doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't make our children more successful. It doesn't prepare them for the future of work, where they're going to be competing with people globally, et cetera, in terms of being able to maintain or attain the lifestyle that they want. So lowering the goal, in my opinion, is never the answer. Maybe if you have 100% goal, we know that from science and statistics that, that's not necessarily it, but like we have to raise the expectation. And the thing is, I truly believe, because I've been there, I've seen it happen, that children rise to expectations. Educators rise to expectations. Our communities will rise to the expectations when we provide them with the agency, the resources, and the support that they need to do it. And so that is one of the commitments that I have as a board member, to sit on the board and remind people, because I've been there, I have seen it. I have seen students that people have said, this child has always been bad, they always get in trouble. No issues in a classroom, right? Because there were different expectations, there was different level of support, and there was the confidence and the courage to drive towards greater expectations. And I think that that is absolutely something we can do in APS. We have the financial resources, we have the commitment of lots of our industries and civic organizations. We have to have the boldness to do that on the board, to set those goals and not be afraid of what happens if we don't meet the goals, but to rather be anticipating what it's going to feel like for all of us when we exceed those goals. And that's the type of energy I want to bring to the board.
I love your energy, Miss Howell. I tell you, you brought me a good one today. I appreciate that.
Yes, she is.
Yes,
I love this.
Keep the firecracker spirit and rise all our children to the top.
That's right.
But what I heard you mention something about industries and partnerships, and how do you feel about donors and their perspective on education? So I guess my question would be is, as it relates to donors, would you select donors who would be inclined to embrace the educational settings in more specifically towards communities, or you just want them to be a general donor?
Yeah, so I think that we have to listen to community. We have to center communities. People are living and experiencing things each day. And I don't live in every community. So you may be in a community where you have more knowledge about what's going on, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. And we need to be able to invest in solutions that come from the community. And I think that there is a beautiful place where our grass tops, those who are, sit in organizations, et cetera, who have resources, can align those resources with the things that communities are saying that they need. There's a great article that was out there that was just sort of like, we need our partners sometimes to just trust us to solve the problem. Give us the resources, even some parameters, but let us do the work, like sort of get out of the way so that we can do what we need to do to make sure that our communities are strong and that they're thriving. And so in terms of partnerships, I think we need to have partnerships with parameters also, right? We need to amplify community. We need to amplify what is happening on the ground with people who are experiencing it every single day. And again, make sure that they have the ability to solve those problems. And they may pick different problems to start with to solve, but I really always believe, you know, when you see kids start to learn something and then they're willing to try something bigger and try something bigger and try something bigger, because confidence comes in the doing. And so being able to do things and get solutions allows you to go after and tackle greater things. And we need to stop assuming that other people have to come in and save communities, but actually allow communities to be a part of the process of saving themselves.
That part.
I'm going to say thank you. I'm waiting on Miss Howell.
I'm here.
Oh, good. But you cut off actually, so I want you to say that part and whatever else you said. But
no, that's all I said, that part right there.
Yes.
Because I truly, and that's why I wanted you to be on here, Miss Sherelle, because I know it takes the community to fix the community. Everybody try to come in and dump these resources, and they bring these people and they take these pictures, and y'all know me, I'm gonna call it out. And I'm like, please, give these resources to the families and let them take. Everybody is not everybody. They can do it. Just give them the opportunity. Like you just said, hey, listen, once this kid try these, they get the hang of that. They like, oh, let's go up. Let's do some more. I want to do that now. And I remember a time where we had so many things for our babies to do where we couldn't even, it wasn't even enough time for them to get in trouble. And I think we have truly relaxed that, and we have stopped doing those different organizations. I remember you could just walk through the hall and pick which type of club you want to be part of, beta, dance, Spanish, or making a quilt or cooking. Like, we had clubs throughout the school year that the school took a day. It wasn't, this teacher standing in front of us, and we just learned something different on our own. Well, not on our own, but with a teacher on our own time with our peers. And Lord, those were just some of the best time. I don't know what we're doing now, but I know I have a little hope that we will get there. I want to turn it over to some of the people in the room. If y'all got questions, please raise your hand and let us know. But I wanted to ask you this while I wait on any of them to see if they want to ask a question. Mm-hmm. What policy that we either have or you think we need to create to help boost engagement? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, Travis and Keisha love them. Whenever they call and say, Miss Howe, can you do this? Can you do that? I'm here. Yes, send it to me. I'll share it. So what can we do different to kind of get parents on board? Because let me just say this. I know some of us are busy, but a lot of us want to be engaged.
Mm-hmm. When I was teaching, actually, I won't even say when I was teaching, because we used to send out a lot of surveys and we wouldn't get a lot of response back, right? And then when I was a parent, I used to be like, oh my gosh, why don't people fill out the survey, right? And then when I was a parent, I thought, oh, I'm going to be this level of engaged. I'm going to do all these different things. I'm going to be that parent that's like in the classroom doing all these things in life. You work, you have a lot of other things that come. But one of the things that really bothered me about sitting in the parent seat is that I always felt like engagement was one way. It was, you want me to come to the school for this meeting that you set at this time that works for you. You want to be able to call me during the day at any point in time to let me know what's going on with my child, but I can only speak to you during these points of the day because you're at work working. And I'm like, I had to tell a teacher, hey, you're at your job. I am also at my job. So if I can't call you every minute while you're at your job, I need you to have the same sort of respect for me. Like, we can set up a time, like we can do these things. And so I think one of the things that I would love to see is that our engagement be two-way, that it's not just you guys can come here and engage with us here at these set times, but also we're going to come into the community. We're going to find times that work with you. We're not just going to ask you to give us a survey and never let you know what happens with the results. Like, we're going to be a part of this process with you. And I think we started that work with our Go teams. But I don't think that the way that they are in place right now is actually allowing people who are on Go teams or who are in communities who want to participate in these things to actually engage. And so I think there's some revision, there's some additional thinking that needs to happen in terms of the policies that are set for this shared governance that is supposed to happen. And I also think and would really love for us to figure out how to make information more accessible. I don't know about you, but I have spent a lot of time trying to find things on the website. And it's just difficult to do. And if we know that our families come with different levels of experience with, literacy, with technology, et cetera, then we need to be more thoughtful and mindful about making sure that information is accessible and that it actually gets out to people. Because there are still a ton of people who have no idea that we even have a school board election happening in November, right? So how can they be engaged if they don't even know? And so we really need to think about how, through policy, through the things that we're doing already to engage parents, how effective they actually are, and what else is there that we can do and make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to doing, and not just as a check mark, oh, I'm supposed to have a listening session or we're supposed to have a town hall about this before we make a decision, but that there's actually space and time to hear what the community says and reflect on that before we move forward with the next step.
Well, I most definitely appreciate that. I look forward to these last couple of weeks. Much success, and I know we're gonna do some great things in the future. Yeah. I want to turn it over to Sherry. I don't see any more hands, so I'm gonna let Sherry ask her question. And once you are done, Sherry, I want you to give us your closing remarks. Let us know how we can help get involved. Let us know when early voting start. Not enough people talking about it. I know a lot of us on this call is trying our best to get the word out and just let people know. I know it seems a little off, but we do have an election coming very, very, very soon. So, Sherry, I will turn it over to you. You mute.
I'm mute. My questions was in regards to charter school. APS have a lot of charter schools. And what is your take on allowing new charter schools to come into APS? My reason being, Georgia have the same demographics of low performing. Georgia really don't spend a lot into education. And in Atlanta is the same demographic. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, I believe that we need to invest in community schools. I think that there are opportunities, there's innovation that's happening and that can happen in our schools that we have right now. And so my position is there's no silver bullet, right? We have charter schools that perform well and we have charter schools that do not. We have traditional schools that perform well. We have traditional schools that do not. The majority of our children are in our traditional schools because of the numbers and the way that that works. And so it's my goal to make sure that every single school where a child is in is a high performing school, and that we are doing what we need to do in the district to bring that innovation, to bring that excitement, that joy, the resources, the support in-house so that the majority of our children are actually getting what they need and deserve.
Thank you. Good answer.
So I appreciate this time. Thank you so much. Give us some closing remarks. Like, how can we get involved? How can we help? Is it some things you're working on that we can be supportive of or share? And when do early voting start for the people who don't know?
Yes. So first, just thank you so much for having this, for putting this on. I always tell people that in my entire time in education, I have always found that we have educators who are committed, that we have community members and parents who are very committed to seeing great things happen in school. And I just really appreciate being in the space with people who are like, yes, this matters to me and I am here. And I think that there are even people who this matters to them and they just don't have the ability to be here. So I love that you've put this on. I love that it's being recorded so people can access it when they have the ability. And I think that's one of the highlights that sort of came out of the pandemic, is like making things more accessible. Asynchronous is what they say. You can watch it whenever. So one, first, just thank you very much for you all being here, for your questions, for your engagement, and for your commitment to our schools. I am, again, Nkoyo Effiong Lewis. I am a teacher, I am a special education attorney, and I am a mother. And I tell everyone, you know, at the end of this 4-year term, my 4-year-old will be 8. So he will be in 3rd grade as a young Black boy. And we've looked at some of the statistics. We've heard about these statistics for our Black boys. And so this work for me is not just a, you know, do good opportunity for me. It is really personal. This is about my child. This is about your child, your children's children, and making sure that we have a system that's set up to ensure our children can thrive in the future. I know I would not be where I am today if I didn't have Mrs. Fink, my 1st grade teacher, who taught me to read, who everything she said to me was gospel. My mom used to laugh if Miss Fink didn't say it, I wasn't going to do it. She'd have to call Miss Fink to let me know, yes, it's picture day or these types of things, right? So our children are in rooms with educators every day. It is not lost on me that my children spend a large part of their day in schools. And those schools need to be places that are filled with joy, that are safe, supportive spaces for them to learn, because they deserve it and they're worth it, and their friends are, and our neighborhoods are, and our communities are. And I truly believe that we can create a system that works for all of us. And that is the work that I am taking to the board with all of my years of experience and actual proven results and being able to move the needle forward to that. And so I am asking for you to partner with me in designing a school system that delivers an excellent education for every cluster, every classroom, and every child. Because again, race and place should have no bearing on whether our kids have an opportunity to be successful. And so with that, early voting starts October 16th. We are literally, 12 days away from your first opportunity to cast your vote. And I hope you will vote for leadership that is bold, leadership that is committed to children, leadership that wants to work with you to make sure that we're getting the results we collectively want to see. And I believe that I am a leader of that sort, and I look forward to speaking with you, engaging with you. If you are in communities and would love to come and talk with more people, we're always looking for volunteers to help us knock on doors. Yes, I get out there and knock on doors myself and talk to people, because it is important that I am hearing from the collective around what we want our school system to look like. So with that, I really thank you for this opportunity. You can follow me. I'm on social media at Nkoyo for APS. And you can also follow the website, www.nkoyo for APS. And that's NKOYOFORAPS. Let's go design a school system that works for all of us.
Absolutely. Can you put that in the chat? Because I will most definitely share all that today. We have some more conversations coming up. I really want to just shout out all of the young ladies who are running, because all of them did get back to me, because I was trying to do this before early voting so that people can get a real personal opportunity to get to know each individual, and just know what they're about, and just have that conversation. So I really appreciate this. We have another conversation coming up at 12 o'clock, and what I'm thinking I'm probably going to end up doing once I do this, or I get some of the guys want to come on and be able to have a conversation. I think like the following weeks, I will just hold space. And any of the candidates in the community can come on and we just talk about issues and try to strategize, because win, lose, or draw, we still have to live in these communities and work together for the greater good of all our babies, whether it's public, private, homeschool, unschool. We got to make sure that these babies grow up and, just be able to have the best opportunity possible. So I appreciate you. This conversation was so rich, and like I even know for me, like I'm like, oh, she's so dope. Oh, so thank you so much for this. Yes.
Yes. Thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too.
All right.
Thank you, Miss Lewis. I appreciate that.
Yes.